welcome back to another video. It's been a minute. This video was highly requested by some of you guys on Instagram. In this video, we'll be doing a coding tutorial. So I will be talking about these particular topics, what Python is, why you should learn it. This video is geared towards beginners and people that have never programmed before. So I'm hoping that this is super helpful because I would like to create more videos on Python specifically. So the coding tutorial is towards the end of the video because I'm going to cover some terms and Python terminology to kind of help. And so I'm hoping that once I share those and I do the programming tutorial, you can kind of marry the two together and see that in the code. If you want to skip to the programming tutorial, you're free to do that. There's timestamps that are linked below in the description box, which is totally cool. I'm going to be using an online interpreter that is browser based where you can actually compile and run code on demand. I will also leave that in the description box below, the link to it. So I'm not going to be using an IDE, which is an integrated development environment, which is like a PyCharm or VS Code. I will probably reserve that for part 2 of this video when I go deeper into Python. But let's dive in, you guys. I'm super, this is stuff that I love talking about and I'm passionate. This is why I created a channel. What qualifies me to be talking about Python? I've been in technology for 9 years. I was a software developer working in distributed systems and backend for 5 years. And now I work as a systems engineer. And I really enjoy learning about Python and working with it. And I'm hoping, and I'm compassionate towards people that are trying to learn programming for the first time because I did not come from a technical background. I just kind of jumped in there. So there's some things that I wish I could go back and change, I would. So let's get into it. What is Python? Python is a high-level programming language that runs through an interpreter. I think it is one of the best programming languages for beginner because it has a very simple, easy syntax and it's easy to read and kind of grasp what it's doing. I think it's worth learning, absolutely, because it is very much in demand. There's a lot of FANG companies, not just FANG companies, that use Python and hire Python developers. That's like Netflix, Google, Facebook, Uber, and even Instagram. What can you do with Python skills? You can do a lot. You can work in back-end development. You can work as a software engineer. You can work in front end. You can work on the server side and scripting. You can work in network engineering, data analytics. There's so many career paths that you can do with Python. It is one of the most versatile programming languages out there. And I think it's very easy to learn. It just screenshot up here just as an example to show you if you had any doubts about Python. So in this example, you will see a system.out.println in Java and how many lines of code. And then you'll see literally a one-liner of Python that says hello world. So the proof is in the pudding. Questions that I get asked is, what are the differences between a code editor and an IDE? So code editor is very similar to a text editor where you can still develop, you can still get the job done. It's like a glorified text editor. So some examples of a code editor are Sublime, which I believe you have to pay for it. There's Notepad++, which is one of my personal favorites. And then there's Atom, which is a part of the whole GitHub family. And then an IDE, which is an integrated development environment, is basically a one-stop shop for a developer to do their deployments. There's plugins, there's syntax highlighting, there's debug tools, all of that contained in a single interface that helps developers get the job done in an efficient manner. And some examples of IDEs that you might have heard of are PyCharm. There is VS Code, which is also one of my personal favorites. I think these are super important as you're figuring out your programming and coding style and what you like, the tools that you like to work with personally. And there's nothing wrong with using a code editor. There's nothing wrong with using an online interpreter or a compiler, whatever is going to foster and help you learn in the best way possible. Everybody has different learning styles. So with that said, let's dive into the tutorial. Walk through some programming terms, kind of breeze through these as quickly as possible. Just because, again, this is for people that who are interested in coding or who have never coded before. So I'm going to jump right into it. So at the very top, you can see here I have comments. So comments are just ways to document your program. It's really good if you are new to code to get into practice, to start documenting, because if you're self-taught or you're interested, if you start working on different projects, it's always good to remember what you worked on last and all of that. And then when you start working in industry, it's really good because you may not be the only person that looks at your code. So in Python, the little hashtag symbol that you would see on Instagram or Twitter is how you would create a comment in Python. And then these are just some examples of like what is not considered a proper comment in Python. Strings are values that are in between quotes or double quotes. So here are some examples of strings. I have an age, a demon slayer, a message. So these are examples of strings. It's anything denoted by single quotation marks or double quotes is considered a string, which is a literal. So it's neither an integer, a float, or anything like that. And I will be talking about those later on. Variables are just placeholders in your program's memory that store data values. That's it. So data becomes a variable as soon as you assign a value to it. So if this was just like J, well, that would get an error because J means absolutely nothing to the interpreter. It would crap out and throw an error. However, if I add an equal sign to it and I pass in some sort of value, then it becomes a variable. So there inside of Python, there's these different methods or functions that you call to print data to the console, and also in Java and other OOP languages. This is calling the print function J. So as you can see, my variables, I have some names in here, and all it's doing is like calling the print function to display Jin and Kazuha. These are characters on the video game Tekken. I love Tekken. I used to be a Tekken geek. I don't play anymore because adulting is hard, but that's where the names came from. But we're just calling the print function, and if we were to run it, it would just show Jin, and then it would just show Kazuya. I think it's either Kazuha. I think it's Kazuha. Some people say it Kazuya. It don't even matter. So data types, there's different types of data types, and this is universal in all programming languages. It's integers, floats, complex, and longs. So these are just some examples of the different types of those different data types. So variables can be data types, right? And data types can be variables. So here you can see we have an integer, which is a positive or negative number. Then we have interest rate. If you see a dead giveaway that something is a floating point number, is when it has a decimal in it. And then we have something called a complex number. I'm not going to go super detailed into that, but Python can handle complex numbers, and it's associated with the function called CMath. So that would be like if you were doing any kind of mathematical operation or processing using complex numbers, in your program, your main program, you would have an import CMath, because that's the library that calls the complex function. So here are just some examples of what the complex data type looks like. And all the complex function does is just convert numbers, and it converts strings. You can convert numbers into strings and so forth. I won't go too detail into that, but I just wanted to reiterate the different types of data in Python: integers, floats, complex, and long. That's it. And Python, there's the print function. So I already talked about that. Why am I repeating myself? I don't know. But I know what my point is. So basically in Python, you can actually print out your data type using the print function. And so that's what this example is here. So I have this in my browser already. So this is just an example of, again, some more data types. But what's cool about the print function, if you never worked with Python, you can actually run your value or your valuables all in the same print and separate them by a comma. or you can put them on separate lines. And so here we just have A, B, and C. We have a string value, an integer, and a float, and we set the value of 4, 5, and 6. And then here, this is where you can actually print out the type of data that you're using. So we have string, integer, and float. So if I've already run it, so you can see here this print A, B, and C, 4, 5, and 6.0. 6.0 is my float, and then also individually they print out separately. And then this is really helpful. Say if you're troubleshooting something and you can't figure out where the error or the is coming from. This could be helpful if you're just troubleshooting and trying to figure out. You could do like something like display this type, and you can kind of. So this is just to give an example of the different types of data types in Python. And I'm sorry if I sound like I'm repeating myself. And then another concept that's really big in programming is, and I hope you guys can see my cursor right here, is concatenation. So concatenation is combining one or more strings by a plus operator. So you can concatenate numbers, you can concatenate strings. So these are just some examples of concatenation. You could do something like print my name is KD, and then plus you could have some variable called name or something like that. Oh, well, if I had the print spelled right. But these are just examples of concatenation and its different uses. Operators, so there's different categories of operators. Operators are just how you are manipulating your data in your program. So there's comparison operators, there's Boolean operators, there's logical operators, and there's mathematical operators. So some of the mathematical operators, which you guys would know, is like plus, minus, division, modulus. Those would be denoted by like a plus, a minus, a division, equal sign, or plus, and stuff like that. Then there's Boolean, and then comparison and logical. So this is really big. So Boolean just basically means when you're using comparison and Boolean operators, the whole idea of it is just whether to evaluate whether a condition is true or false. So these are just examples of how you would do a comparison operator. And this is going to be really, really big when you start using loops and data structures, and you're looking at data and you're like traversing through an array and you want to check or evaluate each element. You're looking for a name or you're looking for a specific object or number. It's really, these will come into handy, is comparison and Boolean. And then lastly, I have a demo for this. I wanted to kind of explain this, is functions. So functions are code that gets executed when you call it. Okay, KD, can you expand on that? Sure. Functions basically are here in this example here. Again, I love anime. I love K-dramas, but we'll save that for another video. But there's a function called anime, and I'm passing in two parameters here called show and character. And then I'm calling the print function that calls this anime function, and it shows my two parameters, show and character. So what I want to explain in this example is the difference between parameters and arguments. These are very big core concepts in programming fundamentals, is that parameters are the variables inside of your open parens. So it's defined. This def is just shorthand for define. My function is called anime. My parameters are these two parens, but within that I'm passing in two, which is show and character. And then my arguments are the values associated with these two parameters. So basically parameters are just the input variables inside the parentheses that when you define your function, those are the ones that get pulled into your program. And then arguments are just the values associated or assigned to those parameters. So let me show you. I can show you better than I can tell you. So I'm going to pull up my browser really quick because I already have this here. Sorry, y'all seeing all of my good tea. So here, if I run this, which I think it's already here, if y'all can see where my cursor is. So my function is called anime, and I have My Hero Academy is my argument, and Todoroki, he's bae. Oh, I spelled My Hero Academia wrong. Whoop. Tomato, tomato. I cannot spell today. So let me run it again. We can't disrespect. There we go. So My Hero Academia is my argument, and then Todoroki is my other argument. So character is equal to Todoroki. My Hero Academia, you know what I mean, is that. And I mean, there's different ways, and I'm going to go into this maybe in another video where we can deep dive, which is what I would like to do. But there's different ways that you could even write this. I mean, you could even create, even add a little more complex things like more variables, and then call those variables that call those variables, and do all kind of really cool stuff. But this is just kind of to give you an idea of what a function looks like, how it gets called. In the next video, I would like to go more into detail about how to create a function, and or excuse me, how to create a module, and then inside your module you would call a function like this, whatever you want to call it or define it. And then in your main Python program, you would do an import of that module, and then that module would call your function. So it's like almost like a call chain of events that are happening, but I'll go into a different video about that. But I just wanted to show you guys an example of a function. In this video, we have covered comments, syntax, how functions work, arguments, variables, data types. So this is going to be the first demo. The next thing I want to talk about is list. And if I'm looking over to the left, I'm looking at my notes and kind of keep me on track so I don't go over time. I'm super nervous that this video is going to be super long. Just a friendly reminder, there will be timestamps. So if you don't want to watch the whole thing through and you want to go to a specific part of the video, you can do it, because I'm going to put the timestamps in here. So one of the things I'm going to do is show you, introduce you to the different types of other data types in Python. So there's list, there's tuples, sets, and dictionaries. In this particular video, I'm just going to do a list. So I'm going to do a basic list. Again, anime, because I love anime so much. But let me get into the definition of what a list is. So a list is just used to store multiple items in one single variable. So it's similar to an array. So let me show you. So we're going to call this list anime. And usually the big hint of when you know you're using a data type in Python, when you see a bracket, you know you're dealing with the data type. So it would be similar with an array. And then I think in the next video, I would like to expand more, deep dive more into loops and tuples, lists, and arrays. I am going to do an array in the next demo, but I'm just going to show you guys here. So we're going to call it Demon Slayer. So this is a list, and I'm calling it anime. Let's do Sailor Moon. Oh, help if I had double quotes. And then we have Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball Z is so clutch. Like, oh my God. So that's like an OG. If you're really into anime, you mess with. So that's it. So we just have a simple anime list, and all of these variables within this list are all defined to anime lists. So again, storing multiple items in a single variable. So when Python runs this, it sees all of these, but it's really looking at anime list. And then inside anime list happens to be all of these elements. So we're just going to call our print function, and we're just going to say print anime list. So print what's inside of there, and then just run it. And then boom, there's the value of our list. So lists can get really complicated, but this is just kind of the basics of like what a list is. You might have a scenario where you don't want to define, it's like an efficient way of coming up with variables that you want to use in your program. You may not want to do like 20 different variables if it's something that's related, and you may want to put it all in a list and then just read in that list and then manipulate it. And then here's another example that I have. So here's another example, kind of expanding a little more, but it's still simple. So basically we have a numeric list called, I named it sum list. And basically in this example, I'm going to close this guy out. In this example, we're just going to check to see if 11 exists in this list. So we're going to use a for loop. So we're going to loop through and we're going to identify every element in the list and see if it's equal to the value 11. And then if it does, we want to call the print function and say, yes, this element exists. And then I put this on purpose down here so you guys could see like the different ways of checking, kind of like if else and stuff, different ways of evaluating whether a condition is true or not. So I know we talked about early on in the video about comparison operators and Boolean. This is an example that I was talking about, is how you can use data structures to evaluate whether a condition is true or false. So here we have some lists. We have 4, 7, 2, 8, 11, and 13. So I put a, before I enter my loop, I just want to say, hey, check if 11 exists in this list. And we're using a for loop to do that. So here for I in some lists, I is for index. So basically, if you were to like kind of break this down, I'm not going to execute this, but basically when you're evaluating, this is what helped me learn loops, is just like sketching out what it's actually doing so I can understand how they work. But basically all the loop is going to do, it's going to come through here and it's going to look at each and every element. So is 4 equal to 11? No, that's false. Is 7 equal to 11? No, that's false. And so on and so on. So it's going to go through this loop. It's going to evaluate if this it's going to keep looping until this condition is true. So it's going to look through here. Boop, boop. Sorry for the sound effects. And then it's going to get to 11, be like, oh, okay, I found where this condition is actually true. Is 11 equal to 11? Yes. Print this message. And so I ran this already just for the sake of time. I'm super scared this video is going to be long. And it says checking if 11 exists in loop, element exists. And then I just wrote another one here that says print checking if 11 exists in the list. So this is just using an if condition, which is another way to kind of check elements in a list. But this is just kind of like a basic. But in here it just says check if number exists in the list. So I'm just saying, hey, if 11 in my list exists, then print element exists. So that would be the second print here. So this is coming from the loop. And this is coming from the if block. So this is just a very basic way of just showing how a list work, kind of how they work and stuff. I would like to go in more detail in the next video, not this video, but more detail, more complex examples of like how you would use them. These are like kind of some things that you would do in a coding interview, especially when they say like traversing and all that. So I have another example. Okay. So in this example, I went ahead and pre-copied everything because if I typed out everything, I just for the sake of time. Again, you guys, this is, there's going to be timestamps in here. So in this example, and by FYI, I'm going to put the link in the description box. I'm using Rextester, which is an online interpreter / compiler. So I didn't want to do an IDE and like install and setting that up. That will be another video, but this is just kind of quick and dirty and we can get the job done. So in this example, we're using a loop to find the maximum value in an array. So in here, we're going to define our array and we're going to call it largest, and we're passing in 2 parameters. What we talked about that earlier, r, comma, n, which is for array, and a value of the size of our array is equal to n. And then whenever you're creating an array, you always have to initialize it. And initializing is basically letting the program know that you're getting ready to set something. So remember how we talked about variables and stuff like that. You can't just start going into coding if you haven't declared all of your variables before, because then you get a whole bunch of, but y'all got this. So anyways, so we're defining again, function called largest. And then here we're initializing it. And then we're going to traverse each array element, and we're going to compare each and every element to what we think or what we've identified in our array. And it's a one-dimensional array down here. So all of our input values are here at the very bottom. We could have put them at the top, but basically, and what does traverse means? In data structures, like when you start doing data structures and algorithms, all traverse basically means is touching each and every element of your array or structure. So it just basically means iterating, moving through. So let me show you. So these are our elements. So these are all of our values. We've got 1, 2, 3. So this is a one-dimensional array. So basically in range, boom, 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 1, because it's a one-dimensional array. If the index is greater than the max, then print out the max value, return max. So something in Python with return. So say we didn't have this return value. What if it was just looped through? If you don't have a return or a print, it'll execute what you tell it, but it won't return or print anything. That's why it's good to remember to put those things, because if you don't, it'll execute everything above and then it won't return anything. Well, actually, you'll probably crap out because it's like, there's some stuff in here that I don't see. So, and it's going to return the value. So what does that look like? So basically, all it's going to do, it's going to look at this. It's going to say 8. And it's going to say, is this my, it's going to come in for the first time. And it's going to say, is I greater than the max? Well, we don't know what max is. We're just looking at our first element, right? So 8, is that greater than the max? Well, we don't know. So let's go back in the loop and look at the next one. Is 200 greater than the max? We don't know. We're going to go back in our loop. Is 45 greater than the max? No, we don't know. So let's go back into our loop. So you kind of guys get the idea. So we're at the very last element in our array. So now it'll say, well, is this the max compared to everything that we've looked at? Yes. So let's print this value. So let me delete this. So as you guys see here, my max value in the array is, oh, I need to run this again. That's when I was like, there we go. My maximum value is 4,400. So it's basically, beating myself up because I'm so excited talking about this stuff. It's basically traversing. It's moving through each and every block, and it's comparing the previous value to the next, right? We're traversing. We're comparing from the second until that condition becomes true. So this is why it's so important to understand logical operators. Logic is something that I really struggled with in programming, is kind of thinking like a computer and really trying to break down the steps of what it's doing. This kicked my butt when I was learning to code. So this is stuff that you can easily pick up. You just have to exercise those muscles. But this concludes the tutorial. I hope this was super helpful. Please let me know, give me a thumbs up if you guys would like to see more content like this. I would definitely like to expand and do like full-scale projects. I would like to do an installation of PyCharm and go more into detail and then do more stuff. So anyways, thank you guys so much. I will see you in the next video. All my best.